He sat there stewing as Loras, Garion, and Jon left. Jon. That wasn't even the boy's true name. Jaehaerys Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne, and not Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell. In a way, he was happy for the boy, with everything he had done for his family, and with his temperament and personality. Jaime was right. He was what the realm needed. So then why was he so damn angry about it? Was it just not knowing? Was it that he should have guessed it? He prided himself on his intelligence, and yet he not for once suspected it. He had known there was more to Jon than just Jaime taking him under his wing. While unlike Jenna, he had never suspected he was Jaime's son. He had known there was something else about him. Seeing all the things Jon had done since coming, West, he had thought Jaime had seen it too, seen that spark in him and wished to see it develop. As he looked to his brother, he realized then what he was so angry about. Why hadn't he confided in him? "I'm sorry, brother," Jaime said. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep it a secret from me?" Tyrion said, his hurt clear despite the angry tone. "Jon needed to know first, Tyrion. I couldn't tell anyone until I told him." "Then why didn't you tell me after then? Why wait until now, Jaime?" We needed to deal with it. You remember how Jon was before we left? How hurt he was? Imagine it, Tyrion. For 10 years, you think you're one thing. You believe yourself to be a stain on your father, only to find out you're not and never have been." Tyrion closed his eyes. He knew how that felt. That was his life. Or at least it was until Jaime returned. Every day he'd not only felt a stain on his family, but been made to feel it. His father had made that perfectly clear. Was that what Jon felt? If so, he could imagine what it was like to suddenly have your world turned upside down. "I understand that. But why didn't you tell me, Jaime? Did you not trust me? There's no one I trust more, brother. Once Jon was told he was my king, Tyrion. So it was Jon's decision? Aye, but not just his. Once he came to terms with it, he wished to speak to his uncle. He needed to know. We talked about it then, about telling you all, and decided not to," Tyrion said slightly bitterly. "Bitterly, yes, but not for the reasons you think, brother. Jon wanted to tell you himself, but he wanted to know what it means, what being a Targaryen means. He needed to find a sense of himself. Tyrion, so that's why you went north. Aye, not to raise the north to your cause? What? No. Tyrion, there are things about Jon, strange things, gods. I don't even know how to speak of them." "What things?" he asked curiously. "Do you know what a warg is? A green seer? Dragon dreams, you heard of them, right? You're saying Jon has visions? It's more than that, Tyrion. The things he can do. He sees the past, the future too, not clearly. Not all of it makes sense at first, but he sees it. I needed to know, to be sure. You don't remember Aerys, Tyrion, what he was like. He claimed it too. Said he saw things, that he was doing this all to save us, but he was mad." "Wait, you thought Jon mad?" "Aye, Jon," Tyrion said, laughing. "Tyrion, if you'd seen him with the egg, or heard some of the things he talked about. While we were traveling, it happened more and more. He almost walked off the ship when we passed Dragonstone." "He tried to kill himself?" Tyrion said, shocked. "What? No, not that. He was in a vision. He saw his family, saw them all, and was trying to walk to them. But it scared me, Tyrion. Terrified me. So I needed to speak to people too. His great uncle is the maester at Castle Black. There's a Targaryen at the wall?" Tyrion's voice was full of surprise. "Aye, Aemon, son of Mikar. Aegon, the Unlikely's older brother. He must be gods. He must be nearly 100 name days. 6'90" and sharp as a tack. I spoke to the man and he cleared things up, explained some things, some he didn't know, but that, and knowing John as I do it, was enough. So you wish to be certain he wasn't losing his mind? Aye. Between that, John needing to know himself and not wishing to leave you with this knowledge and just race off north, that's why I waited, brother. Tyrion looked at his brother and could see he was being honest with him. He had never lied to him, never told him an untruth, but still there were things which annoyed him. Blaine. He said, voicing one of them, Sir Richard Lonmouth. I was unaware it was he. I was given the name by a friend. Oh, Barristan Selmy. He knows? He knew Rhaegar even better than I. John looks like him. Oh, not enough that it's clear yet, though it's getting more noticeable as he grows. But Barristan recognized him and pledged to him. He brought Richard in, though we hadn't spoken of him. Gods, Jaime, I didn't think you had it in you, Tyrion said, laughing. What? Jaime asked, confused. To conspire so. I've had help. From a brother, though he didn't know it. Tyrion. I really am sorry. It's fine. Let's drink. I have a need to get really drunk, Tyrion said, and Jaime laughed. So you're with me? Always, brother. Tyrion said, pouring some wine. Sansa. She woke up excited. Fang was asleep on the end of the really large bed. She looked around the room and found the colors so much brighter than those in her rooms in Winterfell, just like she had found the whole of the West so far. It was like once the sun came up, everything around her brightened up. Even the flowers seemed more vibrant. As she got up to dress, she shook her head. She was used to having servants to help her, but what was she to do here? Was she to dress herself? As she moved to her wardrobe, she heard Fang growl, and a moment later, there was a knock on the door, and two girls walked in. My lady, we're here to help you dress and fix your hair. Thank you, eh? Lara, my lady, Lara and Sarah, she said, looking to the other girl. Both of them seemed to know exactly what they were doing, and Sansa was shocked by how well Sarah fixed her hair. She looked so different when she saw herself in the looking glass. Her mother had always tried to have her hair done in Southern styles, but Sarah was a master at it. She smiled as she finished, and with Fang beside her, she walked to the hall to break her fast. Entering, she saw Jon speaking to Joy with Loras laughing beside her. Tyrion was speaking to Jaime and Daisy, and as she moved to the table, Jaime's aunt called her to sit with her. She looked to her brother, who smiled, and she moved nervously to sit beside Lady Lannister, trying her best not to let it show. My lady, she said with a small curtsy as she took her seat. Lady Sansa, please call me Jenna, the woman said with a soft smile. Jenna, she said warmly. I hope you're settling in well. I am my Jenna, thank you. We'll be heading to Lannisport after breaking our fasts to meet with Loras's family. Loras told me you're to foster with them. I am, Sansa said as Jenna leaned in to whisper to her. I envy you, my dear. When I was young, my father didn't allow us to foster. I so wished to see a different place, to be away from home, even for a short while. It is exciting, though I'm nervous too, Sansa admitted. Nonsense, my dear. I'm sure you'll take Highgarden by storm, Jenna said, and Sansa beamed at her. She ate her meal and enjoyed speaking to Lady Jenna even more so. When Lady Daisy joined in, once finished, she went to join Jon and Loras and saw that Ghost had been sitting there all the time with the Black Wolf, both of them eating sausages and bacon which Joy had been feeding them. She felt guilty then for forgetting Fang, only to see when she got closer that her own wolf was under the table being fed too. Looking at her brother with the little girl almost made her a little jealous, but when she saw her brother wince as he moved, she instead rushed to him to make sure he was well. Seeing him smile at her and nod his head did reassure her some, But still, every time she saw the sling or scar on his eye, it made her heart almost stop. She still hadn't fully been told what had happened, only that her brother and his guards had been attacked and Alirs had lost his life. She felt bad thinking on the man. He had been kind to her, and by what little she had heard, had helped save her brother. As for Jon, while he may shrug it off, she found she could not. Seeing him laying in the bed had been terrifying. As each day went on, she feared he wouldn't wake at all, so she had stayed with him as much as she could. When she wasn't with him, she had prayed constantly. The Mallisters had no old gods to pray to, and Sansa was more attuned to the Seven anyway, so it had been the mother she had prayed to mostly. As he turned to her, looking at her with concern in his eyes, she resolved to light a candle in thanks for his recovery. "Are you well, little sister?" Just thinking." "Sansa, honest they'll love you," Jon said. "No, not that I was thinking of." She said, "I'm well, little sister, truly," he said, and she smiled before hugging him as soon as she was done. Joy hugged him too, and she couldn't help the laugh that came from seeing the girl's face. "Now will both my girls join me so we can go welcome Marjorie and her family? Margie is coming now, Jon." "Aye, Joy, she is. Balerion will need to stay here, though," her brother said, and Joy shook her head before looking to Jon and then agreeing. They took their time going down in the lift, and when they reached the bottom, the carriages were already lined up waiting for them. One thing she was glad about with Jon being injured was he was unable to ride, and so he would be joining her and Joy in the carriage. Loras bid them goodbye as he went to get his horse, and Walder came to help Jon climb into the carriage before picking Joy up and helping her in before they set off. She watched as Jon held Joy with his good arm and spoke to her as they looked out the carriage window. He called her over, and she too looked out, enjoying how he explained the sights to her. She was surprised a few moments later when he closed his eyes, and as she reached over to ask if he was all right, a beautiful bird landed on the window frame. Jon Birdie. Jon. Pretty birdie, Joy said excitedly, and Sansa couldn't help but agree. The bird was small and brown and gray, except for its belly and chest, which were snowy white and a bright orange respectively. Sansa looked on as the bird allowed Joy to stroke its chest, much to her delight. She looked to her brother, who was still holding her, his eyes still closed, and she reached out and touched the soft feathers herself. The bird then looked to her and Joy, and then began to chirp almost as if it was singing before it flew away. She smiled when Jon turned to her, and Joy began to tell him all about the pretty bird. When they arrived in Lannisport, they made it to the docks in no time at all. Walder helped Jon from the carriage. Together with Joy, they walked to where the rest of the Lannisters were lined up. Loras joined them on their way, and she was surprised to see a group of dark-skinned women sitting on some rocks looking at her and the Lannisters with odd expressions. Though before she had a chance to think on it, she saw the ship begin to move closer. Marjorie. Marjorie. She stood on the deck watching as the city grew ever closer, her eyes searching, though it was still too far away to see who, if anyone, was waiting to greet them. Her brother and his betrothed had also come to the deck, as had her mother, her father, and grandmother, though waited below. Her grandmother said it would be unseemly for her to be seen on deck like a wooden figurehead, something which had made Marjorie giggle. When the ship had arrived in Old Town, it wasn't just her grandmother who'd been shocked by the size and scope of it. Her uncles Baelor and Paxter were amazed by it, Paxter especially keen to see it in action, something which did not disappoint at all as the ship simply glided across the water. Even her grandmother, who had complained on the river journey, had felt more comfortable than ever sailing the sea. As for the quarters, they were far better than any ship she'd ever heard of. The sheer size of them alone made them stand out, according to her uncle. That it had been Jon who designed it was something which she would never have believed had it not been from her grandmother's own lips. She'd heard it. They'd been having a meal one night when her Uncle Paxter wondered how the Lannisters, a family not known for its seamanship, had managed to create such a ship. When her grandmother had told him, Jon Snow Paxter, The boy designed this ship. The wind wheels, the mines, all of it done by Jaime Lannister's young squire. Impossible, Olenna. How could a boy come up with a ship like this? I know only what I heard. The boy designed it. A lie. Something the Lannisters put out so people wouldn't find out the truth. Then how come apart from them the only other people who have such a vessel are Northmen? Answer me that, Paxter. I can't. She couldn't help but smile. Thinking about it, Jon, her friend was as clever as he was, sweet and kind. She heard her brother call to her and point, and she looked to see the people standing on the docks. The Lannisters were all there, and she saw Lord Jaime standing beside a beautiful woman she recognized from King's Landing. Beside him were his brother and uncles, and also his aunt. Then she saw Lora's smile, which fell quickly from her face when she saw Jon laughing with some red-haired girl. Who was she? Why was Jon laughing with her? And why did he just put his arm around her shoulder? She felt herself frown as he laughed and took his arm from the girl, and then she noticed it. He was hurt? His arm? What happened to his arm? She looked to his face and saw something. Was that a scar? What had happened to him? She looked at him, her face full of worry, and then she saw him see her, and he smiled, and she couldn't help smiling back at him. She'd speak to him soon and find out what happened. Had someone hurt him? She felt her anger rise. How dare they, she thought, as the ship made dock. As she and her family left the ship and made their way to the Lannisters, she kept looking to Jon and was happy to see he was looking to her too, a large smile still on his face. She smiled back and then smiled even bigger when she saw the favor tied to his belt. He had kept it. All this time he had kept it, and she felt her chest expand as she reached her hand into her pocket to touch his handkerchief. The introductions were slow and formal, and she was almost pushing past people in her eagerness to speak to Jon and her brother. Finally, she said her hellos to Jaime and his betrothed. Or was that wife? She wasn't sure. But she thought Lady Dacey looked incredibly elegant, and nothing like the savage her father had said she'd be. Her brother hugged her, and while she was happy to see Loras, it was Jon she wished to see, though seeing him whisper once again to the red-headed girl annoyed her. Lady Marjorie, a pleasure, he said when she reached him, and as he took her hand and kissed it softly, she felt her heart race a little. But when she clearly saw the scar, she wanted nothing more than to reach out and touch it, to make it better. Jon, your eye? What happened? A long story. May I present my sister, Lady Sansa Stark? My lady, he said, and she looked to the girl, his sister. She was his sister. She smiled as the girl curtsied. An honor, Lady Sansa. I hope you and I can be as good friends as your brother and mine are, she said, as she too curtsied. I do too, my lady. Jon greeted her family, and Loras hugged her mother and brother, and then they were escorted to the carriages. She had hoped she'd be allowed to ride with Jon and Loras, but her father had insisted they ride together. So she sat in the carriage with her mother, father, and grandmother, who looked excited at something. She wondered what it was, for it was certainly not the wedding, as she had made clear on many occasions. Where are we going? She asked as she noticed they'd been traveling longer than it took to get to the house they stayed last time they were here. It seems we're to be hosted at Casterly Rock Sweetling, her grandmother said proudly. Why? Lord Jaime, it seems, deems us more important than his other guests, her grandmother said, and she saw her father's chest puff out. For her. Though all she could think was that she'd be staying at the Rock, staying with Jon and Loras, and would get to spend more time with them. She found herself looking even more forward to the wedding than she already had been. When they arrived, they were shown up to a guest wing of the castle. She was glad that Jon and Loras had decided to join them, his sister and Joy heading back to their rooms for now. Once she was settled in her room, she came back out to find Jon and Loras waiting for her, and they walked to speak to her family. She wondered if this was just a polite visit to welcome them, though. When she saw Jon holding a letter in his hand, she realized it was not. Once they got to the large room that served as some kind of solar and meeting area, They waited until called inside. She watched as Jon walked to stand in front of the table with her father, mother, and grandmother sitting looking at him. "My lord, my ladies, I've come with a request from Lord Stark regarding my sister. He would have sent it to you himself, but once he was informed you'd be at the wedding, and his letter would no doubt miss you, he asked me to present it," Jon said, handing her father the letter. She watched him read it, while her grandmother looked at him, almost demanding the letter, or its contents, be made clear to her. "Lord Stark wishes for his daughter to foster with us," her father said, and she smiled at the thought of having Jon's sister staying with her at Highgarden. "He does. My lord, my sister would no doubt benefit from staying with a house as noble as your own, and closer relations between the Reach and North would be beneficial too," Jon said, and she watched as her grandmother's eyebrow raised. "Indeed, young Jon, my family and I would be delighted to welcome your sister to stay with us," her father said when she saw him look to her grandmother and the nod she gave him. "My lord, my ladies, Lord Stark will be most pleased, and as for myself, I owe you a debt for your generosity. My sister is most precious to me, and I'll not forget the kindness you've shown." She couldn't help but smirk. Where had he learned to speak like this? She saw her father looking at him, a large smile on his face, while her mother too was smiling. Her grandmother was as usual more intrigued than happy. Once done, he looked to her, and they turned to leave. Though Loras was called back to speak to her parents, she saw her brother nod to Jon and smile before they left. As they were walking from the room, Jon leant in close to her and whispered, "There's something I need to tell you. Just Marjorie." He seemed so serious then that it stopped her asking him about his injuries, instead resolving to ask him later. "You can tell me anything, just Jon," she said, and he led her to the lift. "Can you ask your guards to stay here?" he said, and she nodded, telling him not to join them in the lift. Though it surprised her he'd asked such a thing, as he always seemed friendly to her guards. They took the lift to the family wing, which was an even bigger surprise. No sooner did she step out of the lift than Ghost was beside her with an adorable little black wolf pup following. After petting the giant wolf, she leaned down to do the same with the small black one. Both of them following. As they walked, he led her to her room, and when he got there, she saw one of his guards and another giant man standing outside, waiting. The giant opened the door and she walked inside before she realized she was in Jon's rooms. "I had intended to let you settle first, to wait until you were well rested from your journey, but I've kept this from you too long already," Jon said, closing the door behind him. "Jon, what is it?" she asked, a little bit of worry in her voice. "Before we left Casterly Rock to go to King's Landing, I found out something I'd wanted to know since I was old enough to want anything." "Before we left Casterly Rock to go to King's, what?" "I found out who my mother was, Marjorie. She was Lyanna Stark," he said softly. Then when he noticed the confused look on her face, he quickly added, "No, it's not like that. Lord Stark is not my father." If Lord Stark wasn't his father, and Lyanna was his mother, that could only mean, "Oh, Jon, oh, poor Jon," she thought, and didn't know what to say. Everyone knew the tale of how Prince Rhaegar had kidnapped the Lady Lyanna, and how King Robert had fought a war to save his lady love. Even if she had found the king to be a disappointment when she had met him, she still respected and admired him for that. But Jon, that meant, oh, her mind was racing and she found she couldn't look at him. She didn't know what to say, but Jon didn't seem upset by it. More, he seemed to be watching her reaction. "Is your father?" "Rhaegar Targaryen," Jon said, smiling softly. "It's not what you think, Marjorie. They were in love. They married in secret." He walked over and bent down to take a letter from a chest, and then handed it to her. "My mother's own words." She read the letter and felt tears fill her eyes. This was all Jon had to remind him of his mother, Everything she had heard, everything she had believed about the story of how the Targaryens had brought about their own end was a lie. It never even entered into her head what this meant for Jon, that there was not only Trueborn, but had been born the rightful king. All she could think was that he had grown without his parents based on a lie. When I learned the truth, it took me some time to know what it meant, some time to try and deal with it. That's why we went north. I needed to speak to my uncles to find out more about my mother, about myself. I'm so sorry, Jon. I can't even begin to imagine how hard it was for you to find this out. It's been difficult, but also they loved me. Marjorie, my parents loved me. Just knowing that alone, even with everything else that comes with it, just knowing they loved me. He said, and she nodded. They sat there silently. It was comfortable. And that's when it came to her. Jon wasn't just Trueborn. He was a prince, a king. She scrambled, looking for the letter, finding it beside herself, and read it again. His mother was telling him to be the king, to reach for the throne and avenge those who brought his family down. Was Jon? Is that why he was her friend? Was he trying to use her family? She couldn't breathe, and stood up and began pacing the room. Marjorie, please, what's wrong? I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted to. I swear it. I just needed some time to deal with it. Please talk to me. He said, panic-stricken. Is this why we're friends? She said, holding the letter accusingly. What? I don't understand. This letter says you need to take the throne back. Is this why we're friends? Why you've been nice to me? Marjorie. He said, his voice full of confusion. Answer me, Jon. She said angrily. I'm friends with you because of who you are. You, not your family. You, Marjorie, not Marjorie Tyrell. Marjorie, my friend who makes me laugh, who makes me want to dance, who I think about every day. Jon said, and she looked to see if there was any dishonesty in his expression. Why didn't you tell me, Jon, if I'm your friend? Why didn't you tell me? She said, her voice breaking a little. I didn't know how to deal with it, Marjorie. Finding out your whole life was a lie, that who you thought you are is a lie. I needed to fix it in my head first to know what it meant. It's not just the truth. It's what the truth means, what it brings with it. The crown, she asked. Not just that. I'm going to show you something which may seem strange, but I want you to know it all. He said, and she nodded. She watched as he walked over to a small chest and then called her to join him. Inside the chest were two large stones, one white with blue flecks, the other a vivid bronze. He asked her to touch them. They were cold, but as she touched them, she realized they weren't stones, they were eggs. Jon had dragon eggs. She looked to him, and he took his hand in hers, and then they both touched them together. She nearly jumped back. The eggs were warm now, almost to the point of not being able to touch them, but it was the movement underneath her fingers which caused her to be a little afraid. Are they? They're alive. Jon told her of some of the other things he had gone, though of having visions of his sister, of seeing his parents. When she began to think that perhaps he was, if not making it up, exaggerating, or at worst, imagining it. He walked over and took out some drawings. She blushed as she saw one of herself. It was incredibly accurate, but before she could say anything, he handed her one of a girl with deep purple eyes. She was beautiful, her skin dark and her eyes were almost staring directly at her. He handed her one of a dark-haired woman, her eyes as dark as Jon's. My mother, the other, is Rhaenys, my sister, Jon said, looking at the pictures, and rarely had she seen anyone look so sad. Jon, she said, looking at him. Her hand reaching out to touch his face, he closed his eye and leaned into her hand, and she found her fingers tracing the scar on his eye and frowned. What happened? She said, and his eyes shot open as he moved away. We'll speak on it another time. I've one more thing to show you. What? Don't be alarmed when you see it. It'll seem strange and I can't work them right just yet, but
Trust me."
"Trust me," he said, and then began to drag a box towards her, his one good arm making hard work of it. He opened the box and reached inside, taking out something covered in cloth and carrying it to the table. She looked on as he unwrapped it, and she saw 4 objects, 3 black and 1 green. They looked to be some sort of colored glass. "What are they?" "Glass candles. Here, take one," John said, looking to her as she grabbed one of the black ones. It felt cold and not too heavy, but there was nothing special about it other than its color as far as she could see. "Ready?" he asked, and she nodded. John picked up the other 2 black ones. One by one, he placed them standing on the table before he picked up the green one, and then he looked at it, and it lit up. He looked to the 2 on the table, and they lit too. He then looked to the one in her hand. She looked on as the light burned on the top of it. There was no warmth, just light. "How did you?" she asked. Before things suddenly started to happen, she saw images which confused her. A large man was enveloped by a flock of birds. A man in black armor rode on top. A white dragon. A wall of ice stretched as far as the eye could see, while beneath it, men with furs lined up. A woman wearing a white dress looked into a looking glass, her brown eyes staring back at her as she smiled. Marjorie dropped the candle on the table and moved to the bed, her breathing heavy, her heart racing. Why did she just see herself as an older woman? Why was she dressed as if she was to marry Oberyn? His daughters had told him that the Tyrells had arrived, and he had almost felt like going to the docks to see for himself, knowing it would annoy the fat flower to know he was here. But he was still on his best behavior. Though he is getting close to his limit, it was not like him to sit still, and while the brothel had held many delights, he found himself bored, and he hated being bored. He was about to go do something to relieve that boredom when he heard Richard arrive. "Come to finally tell me when I can have the enormity that rides Richard? It's in progress. You want to be certain he doesn't get away, don't you?" "I want his head, Richard. Can you guarantee me that?" "You'll have it. On this I swear." Oberyn nodded. One thing about Richard, he kept to his oaths. Unlike some he could name, he'd almost wanted to run Jaime Lannister through when he saw him arrive, but others could wait until he had the mountain. Was that Lannister's squire the boy with the injured arm? It was, yes, Jon Snow. What happened? "Lannister get a little too rough in sparring," he said with a chuckle. "I believe they were attacked by bandits. The boy is lucky to be alive. Perhaps you saw the cart with the man who wasn't so fortunate." Richard said, a little angry. "I did. Hard to think a lad that young could do all these things people say he has." "Never underestimate the young Prince Oberyn. They'll surprise you every time," Richard said, laughing. Oberyn couldn't agree more. His own girls were perfect examples of that. He tried to picture the young boy, but found he hadn't seen him that well. Just a boy beside the cart that contained a dead man. Perhaps he would see the lad, while here he knew that Ellaria would be pleased to see one of her brothers do so well. No sooner had he thought of his paramour than he felt himself stiffen. Even after all these years, all their adventures, no one held his heart or the rest of him in the palm of their hands like she did. "Lost in memories, my prince? Future adventures." "Richard, future adventures," he said, laughing. "Then I shall bid you farewell and let you go, adventuring. Then we should be setting off once the wedding is finished. You shall have your vengeance within the week," Richard said, and Oberyn smiled. It was an hour later that the note came inviting him to Casterly Rock to meet with Jaime Lannister whenever it suited him best, and when Ellaria came in and they had sated one need, he found he wished to sate another. "My love, I think it's time we bid our best intents to Lannister and his bride." "Really, Oberyn, I'm comfortable. Can we not do it another time?" she said, biting his earlobe softly. "We could always do this another time. Come, my love, let's go visit the lion's den." After dressing and finding his girls were nowhere to be seen, he and Ilaria and his guards began the journey to Casterly Rock. Oberyn couldn't keep the smile off his face as they rode there. He knew they wouldn't be expecting him, and that they'd also be busy helping the Tyrells settle, and so he'd be disturbing them. It was childish, he knew, but he found that only made it even more fun. He'd be nice to a point as was needed, but being nice was boring. You seem to be enjoying this far too much, my love. Poking lions is fun. Until they bite my love, Ilaria said worriedly. The Kingslayer is not his father. He doesn't have the ruthlessness of the old lion. He'll at most try to roar, Oberyn said with a chuckle. Reaching the gates of Casterly Rock, he couldn't help but think on the last time he'd come here, his mother wished a betrothal, and had Joanna Lannister lived then. Right now, he'd be married to Cersei, while Elia would be Jaime's wife. As much as the idea disgusted him, as much as he loved the woman beside him, a part of him would have given anything to make that happen, if it meant that his sister was still here today. My love? Ilaria's voice was full of concern as he felt her fingers brush away the tears. It's nothing, he said, kissing her fingers. After some fun with the guards and the shock on their faces when he saw them, he found it was the imp who came to him first, along with his uncle Geryon, a man who, had he not been a Lannister, Oberyn may have liked. My prince, what brings you here? Tyrion said. Your note said to come at my convenience. I find this convenient. Is it not, my lord? He said with a smirk. It is, my prince. If you'll follow, I'll take you to see my brother. Lady Ilaria, a pleasure as always. Duh, he said, kissing Ilaria a hand. He led them up in the lift to what he remembered was the family wing, leading them both down the corridor into the Lord Solar. Inside, the Kingslayer was standing with his new bride. She was a striking woman, and Oberyn felt Ilaria tense beside him as she studied her form, something he would be doing too, were it not for the man in front of him. Where was he when his sister was being murdered? Why did he not do his duty and protect them? Prince Oberyn. May I present my wife, Lady Dacey? The Kingslayer said. My lord, Lady Lannister in honor, he said, kissing her hand. May I present mine own paramour, Ilaria Sand, he said, and waited to see how she would be welcomed. My lady in honor, truly, the Kingslayer said, and both she and he were surprised by the warmth of his voice and the words he spoke. Lady Ilaria, perhaps you would prefer to join me. I'm sure there are more enjoyable things we could be doing, Lady Dacey said. And Oberyn smirked at Ilaria's reply. On that I've no doubt. There are so many enjoyable things we could do together, his paramour said, and Oberyn was surprised that Dacey just laughed it off. Taking his seat, he was surprised at the Dornish red that was poured for him, but not by the fact that both Tyrion and Geryon stayed too, the imp taking a seat beside him while behind him, Geryon sat, ready just in case. Not that he had anything to worry about just now. So apparently the story you told my brother was, you wished to discuss trade. Story? Would trade not be my reason for coming then? Oberyn said, his eyes looking directly at the Kingslayer. We both know the real reason you're here. Oberyn, let's not waste time with foolish ideas. Dorne not good enough to be traded with. You Lannisters prefer to keep it in the family, so to speak. Should Dorne wish to trade, we can trade. But we both know you and your brother would rather cut your own hands off than take one coin from a Lannister, the Kingslayer said, and Oberyn laughed. Heads, we'd cut our heads off, Kingslayer. Indeed. So to our real business then. So be it. Raid. You want the mountain, he's yours. However, he knows you're here, so getting him will be difficult. How does he know I'm here? Oberyn asked. My prince, everyone knows you're here, the imp said, then he laughed. So you have a plan? We're expecting Clegane to make a move on one of our gold shipments. We've set things up so when he does, he may find a nasty surprise waiting for him, Jerian said from behind him. Jerian said from behind him. What kind of surprise? Oberyn asked. A snake in the grass, Gerion replied, and Oberyn nodded. There is one problem, though, the Kingslayer said, looking at him. Which is, he said. They had better not try to take this away from him. He looked at Lannister, waiting to hear him speak. It'll cost you your life, should you do it wrong. You think my life such a precious thing to me. What price my life to the life of my sister or her children? Kingslayer, what price my life to theirs? He said and meant every word of it. My brother said you're quite fond of your own children, Prince Oberyn, that you have some that are still but babes? I do. He said, thinking of little Doria and Loreza. The youngest babe was still being breastfed, and her mother hadn't wished to leave her behind, but had in the end, reluctantly did so. Then I would like to see you grow old and watch them grow. How then do you suggest to protect me from life itself? Kingslayer, nothing will keep me away from the enormity that rides. Nothing, not even the mention of my girls, would stop me now I've come so far, he said determinedly. I know that. I just wish to make a suggestion if you'd listen. Jack, very well, he said dismissively. Kill him. Don't play with him. Kill him. Let it be done with. I shall consider your words. They spoke then of inconsequential things. Oberyn looking every so often at the Kingslayer's face. He wanted to drag the man over the table, to beat him until he explained his reasons for not being with his sister. But he couldn't risk being banished, being asked to leave. He had asked his girls to behave, and they'd been able to. What say it about him should he not live up to it too? Eventually, he wished to ride back to where they were staying, and declined when asked to stay for dinner, much to their relief. Ilaria and Daisy arrived back as they were walking down the corridor, his paramour smile. One of her genuine ones, so she must like the woman. He'd speak to her later to find out. Taking her hand, he kissed her lips fully, enjoying the feel of her in his arms and the looks of those around him. Prudes, the lot of them. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a red-headed girl walking with a small pup, while a blonde girl spoke to her excitedly. No, Balon, come here. She said to something, and he looked to see if it was the pup. Balon, don't. The girl said louder now, and he saw what it was she was calling to. Demon cat. He heard the imp mutter. The black cat stared at him and his heart stopped. It couldn't be. He leaned down and saw its badly torn ear, its eyes, though he knew those eyes. Around him voices were warning him to beware. A little girl calling for Balon, Balon. But in his head the name like the girl was different. No, Balerion, come here. Balerion, don't. Sorry, Uncle Obi. 'Tis but a scratch, Ray. He didn't feel the cat scratch then, nor now. Didn't even register that it was not the Water Gardens he was in playing with his niece and her cat. Didn't hear the voices as they spoke to him, or Ilaria's worry. As he looked at the dark-haired girl walking away with the cat, he reached out as he watched her fade away. But he didn't feel her as his hands grasped for her. He did, however, feel the tears as they flowed. Arthur. The plan was set. Richard and his men were ready. The girl was well paid and everything was in order when he saw them. A Dornish girl and man was sitting in the tavern watching his prey. Richard too saw them, and as they waited for Lorch to arrive, he began to worry they'd need to do something different. Luckily, though, they left as soon as the man arrived, and when he saw the fat, pig-faced man, he hated that this was the last sight that Rhaenys ever saw. That the princess who saw light in the shadows, who even saw the goodness in her crazy grandfather and laughed thinking him funny when he insulted her or her mother, had to see this face as her life ebbed away. Whatever Jay had planned for him wouldn't be nearly enough. This man needed to suffer, and suffer terribly. A part of Arthur felt they should hand him over to Oberyn. What he would do to the man he could only imagine, but his king would make that decision and not him. So he watched as the man drank and ate, and when the girl made her way to him, he waited. That they needed to get a girl to look far younger than she was only reinforced just how much this man needed to die. The girl, though 10 and 9 named days old, looked no more than 10 and 2, and he watched as Lorch ran his piggy hands all over her. Even the large bag of coin they'd paid her was not enough. Arthur felt as he watched as they walked to the rooms above, the girl grabbing a jug from one of Richard's men. "When?" he said to the man sitting next to him. "Shouldn't be long. The sir will check and then let us know. The cart is ready." "Aye, you checked it yourself. This isn't the first time we've done this." "You know," the man said, a little annoyed. "I know. Just want to make sure this particular man doesn't get away." "Ha, don't worry about that. When the seer wants it done, it gets done." He saw Richard go upstairs and return a moment later with the girl, who quickly left. Richard motioned to him, and he and the other man moved only to see the Dornishman arrive back with 3 more Dornish women. Not bothering to wait, he followed Richard up the stairs and onto the room, finding Lorch laying unconscious on the bed. "I think they're Oberyn's daughters." Richard said. "What are they doing here?" "Same as us, most likely. Luckily we got here first. We better hurry then, just in case," Arthur said, and Richard just smiled. "Don't worry, my friend, we've done this before, Varys." "Aye." He watched on as 2 of Richard's men wrapped Lorch in some blankets, covering him from head to toe. Once done, they quickly made their way back down the stairs and turned left and out the back of the tavern. They placed Lorch in the cart, and Richard jumped on his horse, stopping him before he rode off. "I'll let the king know. Take him back and keep him tight. I have a feeling he's not long for this world." "What do you think he's going to do with him, Richard?" "Richard, nothing good, Arthur," he said, laughing as he rode off. "There was a time when he may find something dishonorable in what he was doing. A time he may question it. But he found that time had long passed. There was no dishonor in justice, and this had been 10 years in the waiting. Nothing they could do to Amory Lorch would be more dishonorable than what the man had done himself. When they arrived back at the house, Arthur had Lorch chained up. Should he wake, he'd not escape, not just because of the chains, but Arthur, Richard's men were ready. Even the Bold himself wouldn't be able to rescue Lorch. He smiled, thinking of his old friend climbing into Duskendale to rescue a king. What he was doing here was far different, though the thought behind it was the same: to serve a king. "We must ride, Arthur. Tom bide," he heard Richard's voice say, and he cursed himself for dozing off. "Ride. Has he, the prisoner?" "No. We have him, Arthur. It seems justice is to come far sooner than we thought. The king wishes him brought to Casterly Rock tonight." "Tonight?" "Aye. What time is it?" "The hour of the bat. We should arrive before the king says he needs him there." "When?" "The hour of the wolf, of course," Richard said, laughing. John. Marjorie had left confused by what he'd shown her. He worried it had been too much, but she needed to know, and know it all. The problem was there was so much of it, so much to tell, and he had tried and it had overwhelmed her. They had so much more to discuss, so much more to even cover. He had not told her of the attack or of his future plans, had barely even begun to explain the magics and powers he seemed to possess. Some of it she had figured out for herself, while he never said he was going for the crown. The letter from his mother pretty much laid that out, while he hadn't told her that he possessed other gifts. The glass candles allowed for that to be the case. He was relieved she hadn't gotten angry with him, but perhaps shock would be first. Maybe the anger was to come. He didn't know. She had agreed to say nothing, though, to speak to him again on the morrow, and then to decide what to do. "Are you coming, or what?" Laura said, walking into this room. "Coming? Dinner. John, They've already started. What? They can't have. It's S. He looked to the window to see it was dark outside. Looking around the room, he saw the glass candles still on the table, the pictures still on the bed. I need to clear this up. Will you help? He asked. And Loras nodded. He and Loras cleaned up pretty quickly, and he was glad he was dressed appropriately and wouldn't need to change for dinner. They both hurried, and when he arrived, he immediately apologized to both the Tyrells and to Jamie and Daisy as hosts before taking his seat beside Joy and his sister. When Jamie looked to him, he nodded, and then watched as he turned to talk to Garland and the girl sitting with him. Marjorie had told him of her brother's betrothal, and he smiled as he turned to see her, only to find she was not here. Is Lady Marjorie not joining us? He asked Loras. My sister is unwell, Loras said, and John could see from his expression he wasn't worried or upset. A shame, he said, and saw his sister agree. Marjorie got ouchy. Loras. No, Joy, she's just sleepy. Sleepy. But it's so early, Joy said, giggling. She's just like you were when we came back from seeing the fishes, Joy, John said. And Joy yawned dramatically, making him laugh. I was so sleepy, Sansa. So sleepy. She turned to his sister, and he was happy to see them get along. I know. It can make you sleepy when you go places, Sansa said. And Joy nodded before eating more. The dinner went on for a bit, and John told Sansa that he'd spoken to Loras's family, and they were incredibly happy to have her foster with them, and were looking forward to showing her Highgarden and all its delights. Something which made her disappointment of not having seen Marjorie tonight all but fade away. When it came time for Joy to be taken to bed, the little girl grabbed Sansa's hand, saying she didn't want her to miss story time. After finishing telling them both the story of two princesses and the big castles they visited, while adding in details to make it clear it was Joy and Sansa he was talking about, John was called by a servant to a visitor. Making his way to the gate, he found Richard waiting for him and wondered what had brought him here at this hour. We have him, my king, Lorch? Yes, he came for the wedding. We have him. Bring him here, Richard, now. I need him by the hour of the wolf, no later. Why, my king? It's time for him to face the justice he's avoided so long. Richard. After Richard left, he hurried back up to the main floor. Racing to his room, he wrote a small note for Jamie and waited while Jorah ran to deliver it. He walked over to the chest and took out the white egg. It was almost time. He sat there waiting for Jamie to arrive, and when he did, he explained what he needed. Jamie never even questioned him, just turned to see it done. Jamie. Arthur will most likely be with Richard. I know. You ready to face him? No. He laughed nervously. Jamie, for me, there is no choice. It's not you against him. It's you. So if you can't work with him, if you can't resolve your differences, then it's you I choose, he said. And Jamie nodded. We'll resolve them. It's time he knows the truth, Jamie said, turning to leave. You're the best man I know, Jamie. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. It was a few hours later when everything was ready. Jorah carried the chest with the eggs while Jon carried Dark Sister. They made their way down through the vaults to the one which opened out into the small cove, and on through the large steel door which shut the cove off from the inside. When he had told Jamie of this place, he had been stunned. He had never known of it. Jon had found it while warged into a mouse, the little animal scurrying between the tiniest cracks in the stone. Over the years, he had come here from time to time, in his dreams as something small, without ever knowing that he'd been warging. Since he came back, though, he had looked for it, and knew now this was one of the sources of the thunder the rock was famous for. This was where Lan had snuck in, having found the cove while swimming one day. Years later, he'd closed the place up, the large steel door stopping any unwelcome visitors. The door could only be opened from the inside, so Walder stayed back while Jorah followed, carrying the chests. As they reached the cove, he saw him tied to the stake. Are you sure about this, Jon? Jaime asked before looking to Arthur, who was staring at him. I am, but first. He closed his eyes and went searching, finding the door open and welcoming. Rhaenys, he whispered, and felt the urgency in the response. He's coming. Oh! Balerion, he needs to see this. He asked George to take the eggs out and place them under Lorch, and then as he moved forward he stopped and told George to take the bronze one away. Arthur. He asked to make a small pyre, which the knight did immediately. He stood watching as Lorch woke up, his eyes frantic as he struggled at his bindings. They stood there as the hour of the owl drew to a close, and just before it did, Balerion arrived. If there was any doubt that Lorch was the man he'd seen when warred with the cat, it was gone as the cat attacked the bound man. Scratching his face and drawing blood, Jon allowed the cat its vengeance. He too lost someone he'd loved. After a few moments, he closed his eyes and whispered, It's time to Balerion, who moved from Lorch. The man's face was badly scratched, and there was terror in his eyes. What I'm about to do may shock you all, but it's necessary. I ask you to have faith in that at least. Jon said, turning to Richard, George, Arthur, and then finally Jaime, each of whom nodded as he took his sword, walked over to Lorch, and knelt, touching the egg before standing up. You took her from me, a girl, a defenseless girl, my sister. You took her from me, took everything she would become, every dream my father and her mother had for her future, her children's futures, everything all gone because of you. She should be here today. She should be dancing at balls and laughing at boys. She should be here with her brother who loves her, but because of you, she's not. I damn you to the 7 hells. Damn you to suffer in eternal torment for what you've taken from me. Jon said, tears rolling down his cheeks. I, Jaehaerys Targaryen, the third of his name, rightful king of the Andals, Rhoynar and First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Lord Protector of the realm, sentence you to die, he said as he raised Dark Sister. Whatever last words you may have, keep them to yourself. I care not, he said as he stuck the sword slowly into the man's stomach. He stared in Lorch's eyes as he did so again and again, each time going just a little deeper. He never raged, never ranted, never changed his expression, just stabbed him over and over. 100 times the man had stabbed his sister. 100 he would get in return. When he reached 49, he saw the sword covered in blood, saw Lorch almost passed out, and yet he still hadn't killed him. Leaning in closer, he pushed the sword in a final time, twisting it, moving it from side to side as the man screamed against the gag. For Rhaenys, he said as he watched the light fade from his eyes. He bent down to pick up the blood-soaked egg, dropping Dark Sister to the ground. As he did so, he saw Jorah move forward to help him, but he waved him off. He didn't look to see the expressions on anyone's faces. Had he done so, he'd have seen Arthur and Jaime look at him with concern. He'd have seen Richard look at him with approval. He had taken no pleasure, though, in killing Lorch. He'd enjoyed that the man had suffered, but it didn't bring him comfort. What he was about to do now would see to that. He placed the egg on the small pyre and nodded to Jorah to grab the torch and bring it to him. Kneeling down, he closed his eyes and prayed before he took the torch and lit the pyre. He took his knife and cut his hand as the flames grew higher, and allowing the blood to pool in his palm, he moved closer and threw it into the them. They rose even higher and higher still. And as he looked around, he was no longer on the small beach in the cove. It was the Red Keep, it was Dragonstone, it was Summerhall, and finally it was the Tower of Joy. And over again, the white dragon flew. He saw it then on the cliffs above Casterly Rock, swooping down and crashing into the flames. He felt them engulf him, felt the clothes on his back burn, felt the dragon wrap itself around him, its wings covering him completely. When he opened his eyes, he felt her on his naked shoulder, felt her as her scales brushed against him, He looked to see Jaime, Richard, and Arthur kneeling and Jorah looking at the dragon in awe. As she chirped happily by his ear, he heard her in his head. "You woke me, little brother. You woke the dragon." "Rhaenix," he said, and the dragon chirped happily.